So today there seems to be some movement, a different mentality, different attitude going on in the Middle East, and partly because of the selection, shall I say, of Joe Biden as president. I say partly. Events have to happen in order to fulfill prophecy. I must say that at the outset here. And so what I want to go ahead and do is read something that I have read before, but this time in plain English. The other was the folks who tried to translate it from Russian to Hebrew to German. For Russian to Hebrew to English, didn't quite do it very well. This one was done very well, and probably because the person who wrote this article, even though he writes for Inside Arabia, his name is Martin J., and he appears to clearly be an American, or somebody, at least somebody who is more fluent in the English language. So I want to go ahead and read this. And of course, this is from an Arab point of view. Obviously he's writing for an Arab magazine. And I'm going to give you my thoughts on this and other things that are happening right now. Netanyahu's free pass on airstrike in Syria has just run out. Remember, this article came out about, I would say, about a day before, maybe 2 days before Israel's airstrike in Damascus, or in the outskirts of Damascus. So this message was relayed to Israel and the world. And then the Israelis did their airstrikes in Damascus. The ambiguous relationship which analysts struggle to explain between Russia and Israel in Syria just got clearer. Putin's patience has finally run out, and Netanyahu's campaign of airstrikes has just become a game changer in the region. The geopolitics of the Middle East has shifted once again since Joe Biden took office as U.S. president. It's a very valid point. What Americans may or may not realize is that the world views Israel as a European occupying group of colonists from Europe. And then on top of that, what Iran and some Muslim countries and even Russia views Israel as merely a proxy, a tool of the United States. Now, both ideas are absolutely false, as incorrect as you possibly can be. I've explained through my hundreds of videos why that's not possible, which has meant that the bigger players have had to recalibrate their relationship and objectives. Yes, some people claim that Donald Trump did not lose the election. Well, my take in all of that was this. Those who are focusing on whether he was wrongfully deprived of his presidency by selectors are missing a very extremely important point. And that point is, it appears that Donald Trump was sent to come up with the peace plan of the century, and it turned into the Abraham Accords. Now, as I said many times in these videos, when quoting Paul, when they shall say peace and safety, then right after that sudden destruction comes. You didn't honestly think that this peace and safety thing would actually have been followed through on, did you? Really? After what Paul said in 1 Thessalonians 5? Come on, folks. But to Christians in the United States, the presidency is more important than the words of Paul, who incidentally got the same words from David in Psalm 69 and verse 22. In Syria, the role of Russia was always an ambiguous one, as in recent times. Many analysts speculated that Putin's relationship with Assad has soured due to Syria's leader reluctance to take a softer line in opposition groups and encourage Iran to remove its military from the country. Well, that is absolutely true. But since President Donald Trump took a softer line, that actually happened, and that now that Joe Biden is occupying the Oval Office, the foreign policy of the president before Trump is now obviously the word of the day in the United States. So he has to recalibrate and once again put pressure on Israel. The idea on the Russian side was simply that it would attract foreign investment and restructuring aid, placing Russia in a perfect position to capitalize on its investment in the country. In plain layman's terms, to exploit the natural resources of Syria. You know, this is something that the sons of Japheth have been doing for a long, long time, exploiting natural resources of other countries. And when I say the sons of Japheth, that includes, obviously, Europe and even the United States. Now the stakes are higher with Biden in office, and there are indications that Putin may be cozying up to Assad once again due to a new landscape where the U.S. will want to flex its muscles in the region, including even in Syria itself. Once again, you didn't think that this peace and safety thing, the Abraham Accords, would go an entire 4 years afterwards? You didn't think it would continue, did you? Seriously, folks. This became apparent on February 25th when the U.S. launched airstrikes in Syria targeting facilities used by Iranian-backed militia groups near the Iraqi border. The Pentagon stated that the strike was in response to a rocket attack on U.S. targets in Iraq in early February. Well, guess what just happened last night? Today is March the 3rd, 2021. What happened last night was the same groups fired back at the United States, killing another military contractor. And after the last one, Joe Biden basically got on the microphone and said that, that Iran needs to be careful. But, well, I guess the ratcheting up of tensions has begun, hasn't it? Now, right here it says Israeli airstrikes in Syria has always been a headache for the Russian leader as they put into question Russia's role there and its strategic relationship with the Assad regime. Now, if Vladimir Putin would have bothered to read the prophets, he would have known that Israel would be the one that has influence in the region, shall we say, and not Russia, not Europe, and not the United States. But the problem is, for so long, the sons of Japheth have been exploiting other lands. It is the norm to them, and one day that exploitation is going to come to an end. Nevertheless, Israeli airstrikes in Syria has always been a headache for the Russian leader, as they put into question Russia's role in strategic relationship with the Assad regime, and Israel knows this only too well. But Netanyahu also uses the strikes to hit Hezbollah and Iran to glean political capital at home, and now to also remind Biden that the Israeli prime minister still has some leverage in how Iran is handled by the new U.S. administration. And the new U.S. administration, there are members of that administration who want to go back to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which is a non-starter. I went on for a couple of years how vile and evil the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action was. It was a means of political officials in Europe and in the United States to collect bribery money, which they're used to doing. It's common knowledge. But that strategy might well be put to the ultimate test soon. When Netanyahu's free pass in Syria expires, and the world will watch whether he has the courage to wage a battle with Russia itself. It's almost time to go to Zechariah 12, because lately I have found a new way to read Zechariah 9, and then when you read Zechariah 12, and then you read Zechariah 9, things begin to become much more clear. Since Russia entered the Syrian conflict in 2015 and changed the course of history there by keeping Assad in power, it has always tolerated Israeli airstrikes against the Assad regime, Hezbollah, and Iran. This tumultuous relationship was pushed to its limits in September 2018 when a Russian surveillance plane was shot down by friendly fire from the ground by Assad air defenses. The incident was orchestrated by 2 Israeli jets which had boxed the huge plane in so as to trick the ground forces into thinking that they were firing at the Israeli jets. Many analysts at the time warned that all bets were off with the arrangement at that point and that Israel was skating on thin ice with its airstrikes. The warning was there, but it would appear that Russia's patience was not exhausted, and Israel continued, albeit more carefully, with its tactical strikes. The worry was that if Russia retaliated itself when ally Assad was being hit, then a World War III scenario could emerge over Syria. Well, let me ask you, okay, so this is rational general thinking here. Well, if Russia would retaliate now, is it rational to believe that a World War III scenario could emerge? Yes, it's rational to believe that. If Russia used its own S-300 to down an Israeli jet, the consequences of this could be wide-scale and at the very least be the starter's pistol of a new proxy war within Syria, which Biden would most certainly not shy away from. And I must say that I think that Barack Obama would have shied away from. I personally don't think that Hillary Clinton would have shied away from it, and I agree with him. I don't think that Joe Biden would shy away from it either. But this is pure conjecture, folks. But it is rational, logical thinking. I mean, look how easily World War I started. Now that worry is very much real, as Russia has recently announced its intentions to do just that. Well, well, well. And like I said, I read the article on depka.com just the other day, and the article was more vague. This right here is much more easy to read and understand. Openly stating that it will shoot down Israeli jets carrying out strikes in Syria, a policy which no doubt follows Biden's new crackdown on Russia and a slew of fresh sanctions. And don't forget the narrative that has been going on in the Democrat Party in the United States that somehow Russia helped Donald Trump get elected. And, you know, folks, you know the narrative. Tell a lie often enough, it'll eventually become the truth. Well, I'm a skeptic of that. The way I see it is, it eventually becomes the truth to the liar, if you know what I mean. In late February, the Russian president's special envoy, Alexander Lavrentiev, unveiled a report in which he condemned Israel for not respecting agreements reached between Israel and Russia on the de-escalation of the situation in Syria following the Russian plane incident in 2018. And his message to Netanyahu was clear. Lavrentiev noted that Moscow's patience had completely dried up. Yeah, the Russians, they have a different way of expressing that. It's really weird how they do it. We'll click this because apparently there's a link to it. Yes. So this was on February 21st. Russia officially announces its readiness to shoot down Israeli planes in case of new raids on Syria. And incidentally, that raid on Syria that came right after this announcement, Russians did in fact send warplanes to try to hunt down the Israeli planes, but the Israeli planes had already gone back into the borders of Israel. But something was said here that it's really bothersome. Right here. According to the analysts, as a first step, Russia may begin to raise its combat aircraft into the sky to counter Israel. They did. They did. That was just a few days ago. And if such a measure does not help, the next step will be to use Russian air defense systems to intercept Israeli missiles. We just read in the other article that even that right there could start World War III. And then a more radical step, opening fire on Israeli aircraft, posing a threat to the Russian military on the territory of the Arab Republic. Well, I suppose what they mean is launching their own aircrafts at the Israeli aircrafts. But what is written here is actually better worded. Somewhere in here, right, here we go. His message to Netanyahu is clear. Lavrentiev noted that Moscow's patience has completely dried up, and if Israel does not abandon its aggression against Syria soon, Russia will be ready to attack Israeli planes regardless of where those aircrafts may be. Syria, Lebanon, or across the Mediterranean. So they're going to defend Lebanon too. Is that what Russia's saying? And what do you mean, or across the Mediterranean? What does that mean? Does that mean in Israel? I think they're trying to use vague language here for a point. It's expected that Russia, for the first time, will launch its own jets when Israel performs such sorties. They did just a couple of days ago, making it harder for the latter to carry out its strikes. But if this is not enough to temper Israel's zeal, then Russia will use its own surface-to-air missiles, putting to bed once and for all the myth that Putin is afraid of showcasing the S-300s in fear that they might not live up to their reputation. Let's ratchet this thing up tighter and tighter and tighter. Right after, for the first time in history, since Abraham's funeral, the Arabs, and I'm not talking about the Egyptians and the Jordanians, they're not Arabs, in spite of what they say. I'm talking about the real Arabs, the real sons of Ishmael. Let me remind you, Jordanians are sons of Lot. Egypt, the son of Mizraim. Syria is not Arab. Syria are the children of Laban and their relatives, the relatives of Laban. Arabs are exclusively the children of Ishmael. That would be the Saudis. Yemen is actually from Esau, and there are also Esau in Saudi Arabia. United Arab Emirates is definitely Arab. Bahrain is definitely Arab. Morocco is Berber and Arab, etc. This could get dangerous real fast, and indeed, Paul said, when they shall say peace and safety. Did he not? Then sudden destruction, not gradual destruction. Well, that changes everything, doesn't it? Gradual destruction. No, don't think so. This, of course, places Netanyahu ahead of elections, except something happened yesterday. The Israeli Supreme Court basically took conversion out of the hands of the rabbis, which I find very interesting. I really don't have anything to say about that now. I might have something to say in the future. And that also puts Netanyahu's election chances in jeopardy, by the way, as it was reported on Depka.com. Really throws a monkey wrench into his election chances, because this really upsets the Haredim that's in his circle of political allies. And they're not going to tolerate it. And so they're going to look to Netanyahu and say, what are you going to do? If you do not work actively against this, we are not going to be with you politically. So that whole thing puts the Israeli elections in complete disarray overnight. Of course, this places ahead of elections in the media spotlight and as a key figure at any negotiation with Iran that the Biden camp will endeavor to secure. There's a whole lot of confusion going on, folks, and confusion leads to trouble. The Prime Minister will no doubt relish the opportunity to be in such position as a broker and the West's main player to what could effectively be a war between the West and Russia. Do you see a handwriting on the wall, folks? It is less clear whether this plays into the hands and his shaky coalition when Israel heads to the polls in March. Well, after what happened yesterday, it does make everything more shaky. What is clear is that undoubtedly a new tension in the Syrian conflict now since Biden took office as the new president, Putin, and the respective leaders of Israel, Iran, and Turkey all now pour all over the map of the country, mulling new battle plans and studying their allegiances. I mean, how much convincing is it going to take for people to pay attention? But given the strength of Russia and the sheer terror of Hezbollah's missile capability alone within Israel, if provoked, one would hope that Netanyahu would be careful what he wishes for. Remember, this is the Arab or inside Arab voice of the Arab people. You know, the very last few words, a man gives his own opinion. Did we not just read in Zechariah 9 that something very terrible would happen to Lebanon? Tyre built a strong city, and it was a strong city back in those days. And they heaped up the dust as silver, as dust and fine gold, like mire in the streets back in those days. But Yehovah will cast her out. I like Yarash better. Adonai will take possession of and inherit it and deport them. Joel 3. And smite her power in the sea, and she will be devoured with fire. Joel 3. That day and time when the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem will be caused to return. He's going to collect the Goy, and bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, or judgment. Valley of judgment. See, it could be the Jezreel Valley. Yeah, we have to be careful. Make sure we keep our eyes open, our ears open, and most importantly, our mind open for the truth. Because in other places it says the Jezreel Valley. Well, the Jezreel Valley is going to be the valley of judgment. Just say it. And Jehoshaphat means Jehovah will judge. And he will judge them for the people, for my heritage, for the inheritance, for the possession, for the land of Israel, and for the people whom they scattered among the Gentiles, and they divided his land. And this generation is yet again guilty of dividing his land, as I pointed out in a video where several videos where I pointed out that the British Mandate promised all of Transjordan to the Jews, and then they reneged. They have cast lots for my people, and have given a boy for a harlot, and sold a girl for wine that they might drink. What have you to do with me? Or it just says, who is guilty? See, this doesn't say, what have you to do with me? Who did this? Tyre and Zidon, and the coast of Peleshet. Who's Peleshet? Gaza, the Palestinians. Those three. Will you render me a recompense? Gamal, to deal adequately with, or fully with, or compensate. Swiftly and speedily, with great haste, return recompense upon your own head. Why? Because you stole my silver and gold, and have carried into your temples my beautiful, pleasant things. Who did they help carry that vile and vicious act out? They helped the Romans when the Romans sacked the temple. The children of Judah and Jerusalem you sold unto the Greeks, that you might remove them far from your border. Probably should say sold to the Hellenes, but it's descendants of Yavani. Modern English would be the Hellenes. In other words, Western civilization. You caused them to be dispersed to the west, that you might remove them far from the border. Look, awake out of the standing place where you were sold, and return and recompense on your head. So he's going to do exactly to the Gentiles what they did to Judah and Jerusalem. And he says, and I will do to you what you did to them. I will sell your sons and your daughters into the hand of the children of Yehudah, and they will sell them to the Sabians, to a people far off. Yehovah has spoken. Now it says, proclaim this among the Gentiles, prepare war, wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears, and let the weak say, I am strong, and assemble yourselves, all ye heathen, and gather yourselves there round about, and let Yehovah bring his mighty ones. So this is the time of the blowing of the trumpet, when all the mighty ones of Yehovah will arrive. They're not going to be allowed to attack Jerusalem anymore. They're not going to take anyone into captivity anymore. You see, folks, we've been looking at Zechariah 9 wrong all this time, as I pointed out this last week. Let the Gentiles be wakened and come up to the valley of judgment, the valley of Yehovah judges. I will sit and judge all the Gentiles round about. Who's round about? Well, you have Iraq, Iran, Jordan. On the east, you have Egypt and Gaza. To the south, to the north, you have Turkey and Russia. And to the west, you have all of Europe and North Africa and beyond. Those are all the nations round about. Put you in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come down. The press is full. The fats overflow, because their wickedness is great. Multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision. For the day of Yehovah is near. The valley of decision. And at that time, the sun and the moon will be darkened, and the stars shall withdraw their shining. And Yehovah will roar out of Zion and utter his voice from Jerusalem. This is the sounding of that trumpet, as we read in Zechariah 9. That's when it's going to happen. And the heavens and the earth shall shake, quake greatly, but Yehovah will refuge his people and be the strength of the children of Israel. So, it says, Egypt will be desolate, and Edom shall be a desolate wilderness, because of the violence against Judah, and because they have shed innocent blood in their land. Now, folks, the Israelis, and rightly so, they call Western civilization Edom. Rightly so. They do it figuratively. And the Christians don't get it. They don't understand. You see, Edom was Jacob's brother. Edom was supposed to treat his brother decently. Edom sold his birthright, Esau sold his birthright to Israel for a bowl of soup, and then became angry with Israel because Israel respected that birthright. So Christianity today, they have sold their birthright that was given to them by Noah, when the blessings were passed out to Japheth and Shem. The greatest blessing actually went to Japheth. If you bother to read the book of Genesis, it said that he would greatly widen the tents of Japheth. See, they were brothers. They were like, Noah even said, they were brothers of kindred spirits. This is how we would say it. He said it a little differently, but it means the same thing. But just like Esau, the sons of Japheth, immediately, even before Paul died, the only apostle to the Gentiles died, they went and turned to idolatry. And Paul warned them they were going to do it. He warned them that they were going to follow another Messiah. He told them this. I pointed it out in several videos ago. And indeed they did. A false one, a fake, a counterfeit. And in so doing, they forfeited their part in partaking jointly in the new covenant, in the root of Israel. The blessing was that Japheth was supposed to dwell in the tents of Shem in the last days as jointly inheritors of the blessing. But instead, they're going to have to dwell in the tents of Israel as servants. Egypt will be a desolation, and Edom shall be a desolate wilderness, because of the violence against the children of Judah, because they have shed innocent blood in their land. What this means is all the lands where there is innocent Jewish blood shed in those lands will become a wasteland, a desolate wilderness, a devastation, desert, midbar, a desert. All of you who wear the mark of the beast, the cross, that's you. Because the cross carriers use their sign, use their mark as a means to distinguish themselves against the Jews, and then to rape, pillage, and murder the Jews. But Yehudah will dwell forever, and Jerusalem from generation to generation. And their blood will be cleansed, and it will be cleansed because Yehovah will settle down in Zion, in spite of what you Gentiles think. Now, so when we go to Zechariah 9, we have to read this differently. No, it's Zechariah 12. When we read Zechariah 14, we have to read it differently. I'll show you. Here's what I mean. So in the last days, he's going to gather them specifically for judgment, not to divide Jerusalem again. No, see, this already happened. Behold, the day of Yehovah comes, and it came on Jerusalem. In fact, you can point out other places in the prophets, including, well, I don't want to steer anybody the wrong direction, but other places in the prophets point this out, that destruction upon Jerusalem is coming, that their spoil will be divided, and it was done by the Romans. So he's going to gather the Goi against Jerusalem to battle. And that's happened. And the city shall be taken. And that happened. And the houses were rifled. And the women were cut down. That word means, shakab, means to be cut down. And the Syrians were the worst offenders. They loved to cut the pregnant women open and kill the children and leave the mother to die. This is what they enjoyed doing. This is what it's talking about. And then it says, half of the city will go forth into captivity as exiles, and the rest of the people will be cut down. In other words, part of the people would be taken into captivity, and the others would be killed. The ones who didn't already die from internal struggles already. And because of this, Yehovah is going to come out and fight against those nations. You see, this is a direct correlation with Joel 3. You got to understand it's not hard for you to understand this way. But the time is coming when I will bring back the captives of Judah and Jerusalem and collect the nations and bring them down to the valley of judgment, and will judge them there for my people and for my heritage. He's not going to bring them there to destroy Jerusalem all over again. He's going to bring them for judgment. See, if you've been reading it wrong and suddenly you realize it, change the narrative. Align your thoughts with the truth always. Because you see, there are plenty of other scriptures out there that makes this case. And here we go. Zechariah 12 is another one. Once again, you can always count on King James Version to add their no sense worth in here to make it sound like something it's not saying. So the burden of the word of Yehovah for Israel, says Yehovah, who stretched out the heavens and laid the foundation of the earth and formed the spirit of man within him. I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling. Let me ask you a question. Has Jerusalem been a cup of trembling for the Gentiles for nearly 2,000 years? No. For all the people round about who besieged, who entrenched against Judah and Jerusalem. See, you have to read this like you read Joel 3. The nations who entrenched themselves against Judah and Jerusalem, he's going to bring them down to the valley of judgment for judgment. Like I said, you can always count on King James to get it wrong. The day comes when I will make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. And they will burden themselves and be cut to pieces, to be incised, severely injured, cut in pieces. They will be cut in pieces. The Goy of the earth are going to be gathered together against it. This time, not like the time before, when the houses are rifled and the women cut down and people are taken into captivity. Not this time. Not this time. In that day, Yehovah says he's going to smite every soos. That is, that soos. Every horse and every bird. See? All the chariot horses and all the birds. What birds? Warplanes. with astonishment, bewilderment. In other words, if it's actually horses, the horses are going to get confused. If it's warplanes, the equipment will fail. And his rider with madness. What? With madness. Wild and helpless panic. They're going to be panicked. Why? Probably because the stars falling or the meteorites falling from the sky. Because at that time, instead of letting the people of Judah and Jerusalem be carried away into captivity, this time he's going to open his eyes upon the house of Yehudah. The house of Yehudah is already there. And he will smite every source of the people with blindness. And the aloof, the gentle lamb of Yehudah, will say in his heart, dwell Jerusalem, strength in Yehovah of hosts, Elohim. And in that day, the Lamb of Yehudah, see that right there, number one, gentle lamb, aloof of Yehudah, will be like a hearth of fire among wood. That is the Moshiach. He is going to show up at that time. And he is going to be like a hearth of fire among wood and like a torch of fire to sheaf. And he will devour all the people round about on the right hand and on the left. Oops. And Jerusalem will be inhabited back in her own place, even in Jerusalem, the city of David, East Jerusalem. Yehovah will save the tents of Yehudah first, and that the glory of the house of David and the glory of the inhabitants of Jerusalem will become great. In that day, Yehovah will defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem. Well, wait a minute. If half of them were taken into captivity and the other half were cut down, that's not defending them, is it? No. That means we were reading Zechariah 9 or Zechariah 12 incorrectly. No, we were reading Zechariah 14 incorrectly. Because this is about the Roman destruction of Jerusalem. And then what's going to happen as a result? Then Yehovah will go forth and fight against those nations as he fought in the day of battle. And his feet will then that day stand on the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east side. And the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof toward the east and toward the west, and there shall be a great valley, and so on. And it shall come to pass that the light will be rare and congealed. If you look in the Israeli Bible, you'll see it. It does say that it'll be dark. It'll be, and that's when you go to back to Joel 3, it says right here, same thing. The sun and the moon will be darkened, and the dark stars will withdraw their shining. And Yehovah will roar out of Zion and utter his voice, his sound voice. roar, scream, shout, thunder, thunderbolt. We know it's the sound of the trumpet because we read of instrument especially. Yes, in that day Yehovah will defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and he that is feeble among them shall be as strong as David. And the house of David, it would be Yehoshua, the Moshiach, as strong as, now it says Elohim, but then it says, like the messenger of Yehovah that was sent before him. In other words, as strong as Michael and Gabriel. And it shall come to pass in that day that I will seek to destroy all those Goi that came against Jerusalem. Well, Romans, you're done. Greece, you're finished. Turkey, you're finished. Every nation that came to fight and seize Jerusalem, you're done. You're finished. And I will pour upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace. I know you Christians, you love to use the term grace, but only in your own narrative. Well, to sit here and say that he's going to apply grace to you but not to the Jew is a fool's statement. And supplication to look not upon me, they're going to look at the one they pierced. They're going to look at the one they pierced, and they will mourn as one mourns for his only son, the only one, his only son, his only child. They're going to look at him as one who mourns for his only son. And there will be bitterness for the firstborn. When they see him. There's going to be a great mourning in Jerusalem in that day, just like the mourning of Hadrimmon in the valley of Megiddo. And the land shall mourn, every family apart, the family of the house of David and their wives, not apart, the clan of the house of Nathan and their wives, not apart, the family of the house of Levi, not apart, but with their wives, the family of Shimei, with their wives, all the families that are left over, all the clans with their wives. And it doesn't say apart. So, saving Judah and Jerusalem first before all Israel is gathered, and then this. Then you have Ezekiel 39. Oh, hold on. Now Ezekiel 39 is talking about dragging Meshach and Tubal and Gog and Magog down for judgment for his people Israel. Now the others are talking about Judah and Jerusalem. This is for Israel. Now it does say those that dwell in the cities of Israel. Is that the Jews? Is that Judah and Jerusalem dwell in the cities of Israel? Well, that's an interesting question. Do we know? Maybe, maybe not. Now, this is so that the house of Israel shall know Yehovah Elohim from that day and forward. And the heathen shall know that the house of Israel were removed, went into captivity as punishment for iniquity because they trespassed against me. And they fell by the sword and land of their enemy. Now I will bring again the captives of Jacob and have mercy upon the whole house of Israel. So what it appears is Judah is there first, Judah and Jerusalem, and then this is going to be done to gather all Israel back. You see. So Vladimir Putin claims his patience has run out. Russia claims their patience has run out. Turkey wants Jerusalem. The EU is demanding Israel go inside the so-called 67 borders, which is a lie in itself. And the United States wants Israel to have the status quo remain in Jerusalem on the Temple Mount. Well, guess what? They are all wrong. Now, I saw a video. What is it? The location of Temple Mount is in plain sight. I might have to do a different video on that. See, it's all over the place. I have to find it. Maybe what I'll do is once I get done uploading this video, if I can find that link, it's a YouTube video. This man, he figured it out. He found out where the temple was. And it's so simple. Once again, simplicity always gets in the way of false narratives. There is a little spot that might be, 10 feet around, which is believed to be the threshing floor that David purchased. And that's the location. It's not far. In other words, it is not far from that location at all where the temple would be. And it is inside. It's inside the walls. It's right across from the east gate. The east gate is still standing. It's right across from the east gate. And he has a picture of what it should look like, the exact location of the temple should be. And it's actually right across from the Dome of the Rock, or they call it the Al-Aqsa Mosque. It's right across from it. This one is, I almost laughed when I saw the video because it was so simple and so easy. and so undeniable. And I love how people try to claim that the Temple Mount is in a completely other place outside the walls, and it's right there, has to be within the vicinity of the threshing floor, and they know where the threshing floor is. Anyway, I digress, but folks, they said peace and safety. The Abraham Accords. You have Paul's warning, when they shall say peace and safety. You have the threat of Hezbollah. As soon as the Lebanese think that the Russians have got their back, you know what they're going to do. You just know it. And if you bothered to read Joel 3, you will see there will be a swift punch in the mouth, kick to the gut, whatever you want to call it, for anything that Lebanon tries to do, thinking that they've got one over on the Jews. We have the Zechariah 9. Where Yehovah will be seen and will blow the trumpet during the storm of Yemen. The storm of Yemen has been going on for 6 solid years. It's going to happen when? What is it? Is it Zechariah? Oh, it's still this one. When the burden of the word of Yehovah is on the land of Hazrek, that is in the Idlib province. The war of Idlib started in September of 2018, a year and a half ago. Is this all coincidence? Are you willing to risk believing that it's all merely coincidence and that things will proceed as normal? I don't think it would be very wise to do so. The absolute panic that happened among the elites when Donald Trump was elected, and the way they acted after they got their power back, makes you wonder how quickly they're going to act to carry out their agenda in Syria. Beware and be careful and be watchful.